So welcome to the Heritage Designation Open House. This is just kind of a brief outline of the things I'll talk to you about this evening, kind of the why we're here. So the impacts of Bill 23 on the non-designated properties on the Heritage Register, an overview of some designation FAQs, what to know as a designated property owner, information on our permitting process and some FAQs around that. Information on the Heritage Grant Program for designated property owners, and then kind of where we're at in the process and some next steps. So again, the why we're here, impacts of Bill 23 on non-designated properties. It's all due to recent legislation changes made by the provincial government. So municipalities across Ontario are reviewing their listed non-designated properties to be considered for designation. So the township on our register, we currently have 105 properties, and 35 of those as of now are designated. So we're kind of at 35 of the 105. So they have designated status. And then as well at a recent council meeting, council stated its notice of intention to designate on an additional 9 of those properties. So pending no objections, we will then have 35 plus 9, so 44 designated properties as of August of 2025. So this work all spurred due to those provincial legislation changes. So Bill 23 and its impacts on the Ontario Heritage Act. So any properties that are right now on the township's heritage register with non-designated status on January 1st, 2027 will be delisted or off the register unless they become designated. And they cannot be relisted on the heritage register for a period of 5 years after that. So not until 2032 could that property be added on the register. After that deadline, culturally significant properties with those non-designated status will lose their interim protection from demolition. So a few whys around heritage designation. So the first one, why is heritage designation important? In general, as a rural community, it's important to preserve our community's cultural and architectural heritage and to conserve the heritage attributes of our structures. This is extremely important now, considering where you want your structure to be for future generations, and also preserving the structures within our community in general just makes it a unique and interesting place to live and encourages local tourism in the township. Is my property designated or non-designated? So as I kind of said, we have different statuses. There's the designated batch and the non-designated batch. 35 of those properties right now are designated, with an additional 9 trying to be designated. So all other properties are non-designated at this time. So what does that non-designated status mean? So right now, if your property is just on the register, it has non-designated status. And the big thing there is it has interim protection from demolition and interim protection from Planning Act applications. So property owners, when you submit if you're on the register and you submit a demolition permit, it provides us 60 days notice. Or property owners are required to provide 60 days notice of their intention to demolish or remove a building or structure from that property. Does that make that's worded better. And then properties with the non-designated status right now have no restrictions on building permit applications. But again, as kind of previously stated, due to that Bill 23, those properties are going to be removed from the register on Jan 1, 2027 and lose that interim protection from demolition. So what does it mean to have a designated property on the register? So these properties are designated by council through a designation bylaw. And these designation bylaws are then registered on title to the property. Within each of those designation bylaws are each of the property's unique heritage attributes. And that's what we are trying to protect from demolition or alteration. So when property owners want to make an alteration to those listed features on the heritage designation bylaw, they will then need what we now have as a heritage permit. The next FAQ is kind of a bit of question staff often get around what heritage designation does or does not do, as there's often so many misconceptions related to what heritage designation does and doesn't mean for your property. In general, it doesn't limit the installation of modern features or renovations on the interior of a building. And it doesn't require the property owner to restore any lost architectural elements. So that's something that isn't there right now. There's also kind of like the myth versus fact on heritage designation. We often find there's several different myths around how heritage properties cannot be changed. Designated properties can be changed, but it would just be through receiving a heritage permit with the township. Another myth is often that they're more expensive to maintain, or that they're more expensive to maintain. But what at the end of the day is often the most expensive is just kind of that neglect to any building, not necessarily the age of the structure. Heritage conservation focuses on minimal intervention, and designation does not require the restoration of features that have been modified over time. And then finally, according to the Province of Ontario's website, insurance premiums should not increase due to heritage designation on a property. Insurance companies may increase premiums for older buildings for a variety of different reasons. If you have like old heating systems or outdated wiring. And some companies might not insure buildings over a certain age, but designation itself does not place additional requirements on the insurer and should not affect those premiums. So how are properties designated under the Ontario Heritage Act? The first one, it's identified as a candidate for designation. So council at its meeting last fall and or winter would have identified your property as a priority property for designation, as you would be a property owner that's on our heritage register. And then that second bullet, after council identifies the property, it's researched and evaluated for its cultural heritage value or interest by the Heritage Advisory Committee at the township. For the most part, that's the current stage of the designation process for your properties. And at this stage, it's kind of where we ask for those site visits, engage with the property owners, get up-to-date photos of the structure. And then number 3, serve the notice of intention to designate. Staff will then write a report which is brought to council recommending that council state their notice of intention to designate. And following that, property owners will receive a notice or letter in accordance with Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And at that point in time, there's a 30-day objection period where anyone could object to designation. And then at the end of that period, council will either withdraw its notice of intention to designate or proceed by passing a designation bylaw on the property. Number 4 and number 5, if council proceeds with that designation and passes that designation bylaw, a copy of the bylaw and the notice of passing is provided to the property owner and to the Ontario Heritage Trust. And there is an additional 30-day appeal period at that time. And if no appeals are received, that bylaw comes into force and effect on the last day of the appeal period. Number 6 there, the registration of the bylaw on title. Then a copy of the bylaw is then registered on title and sent to the Ontario Heritage Trust. And then finally, your property is listed on the municipal register and it has designated status. So what to know as a designated property owner, or what are my responsibilities as a designated property owner? That first one, whenever ownership changes as a designated property owner, the new owner must give notice to the clerk of the municipality within 30 days. Number 2, property owners must not alter or remove any of those heritage attributes listed on the designation bylaw unless a permit has been issued by township staff or council. Number 3, property owners may not demolish or remove the heritage attributes listed on the designation bylaw unless they receive a permit by township council or staff. And then lastly, number 4, they're the maintenance of heritage attributes. It's expected that property owners want to maintain those identified heritage attributes listed on the designation bylaw. And that's up to being in compliance with the township's property standards bylaw. Now moving into the heritage permit process. So once your property is designated, you want to make a change, you have to apply for that heritage permit. These permits have to be received before you make any changes to the heritage attributes on the property. And additionally, what is the cost? Kind of in order to support the designated properties and their owners, there is no fee for a heritage permit application. There would only be if there's an external review is needed or a heritage impact assessment is needed. There might be some third-party costs, but in general, the heritage permit itself, there is no fee. So when is that heritage permit required? So there's 3 different types of heritage permits that you might apply for as a designated property owner. There's a heritage permit waiver, which is when you're doing any change to a designated property where you're not affecting one of those listed attributes. This is a very expedited process. Staff will kind of review what you're doing, and kind of get back to you in a timely manner. Often this would get flagged through the building permit process. So if they see a building permit application comes through for your building and it's for a different outhouse or a different barn that's not the designated structure itself, we would then, staff would then give you a heritage permit waiver, because it's not related to the designated structure. And then the second 2 there's an alteration permit or a demolition permit. So a heritage alteration permit is required for any change that will affect your property's heritage attributes. So that could be replacement, alteration, like painting of brick or stone, like removing your original front door if that is a listed attribute. And those listed attributes are included in your designation bylaw. In the statement of cultural heritage value or interest, there's bullet points at the end of that statement. Those are your property's listed attributes. And those are the big things that through designation we're looking to protect. When is a heritage permit not required? Any interior renovations, any typical backyard work that isn't visible to the general public, or any landscaping that can be completed without the use of heavy machinery. Any general or routine maintenance that's necessary to slow the deterioration or disrepair. So things, repairing landscape features, gardening, repainting with little to no change in color, that caulking, weatherproofing, those types of things would be included as maintenance. And this is just a really cool example that the city of Cambridge has done to a designated structure. So you can see there on the left-hand side, it's an old bank building, or sorry, it's originally a post office, later became a home. So it was designated in the 1980s. And then just in 2018, so recently it was converted to the Idea Exchange. So it kind of shows that adaptive reuse is possible. It was a designated structure for quite some time, and that they did do quite a modern renovation or to build onto the structure. And lastly, heritage designated property owners are eligible to apply for grant funding when they're making any changes to those listed attributes. So this will be information on the grant program. So council has directed staff to create a heritage grant program that will be in place come 2027. So the intention of this program is to assist with any costs, including the adapted reuse of the designated property, any alterations or restorations and improvements of the heritage attributes listed on your property. And this grant program was chosen by council because of its flexibility and that it's really tailored to affect or reflect the local priorities of the structure. And the grant funding can be used for a variety of different types of alterations, small to large, that you're looking to do, and will be is scheduled to be implemented in 2027 to ensure that equitable access once all priority properties have gone through the designation process. So kind of what is next for the property? So the steps completed. So recently council's identified an additional 39 properties as candidates for designation. We're now in the process of doing site visits, and we also have some drop-ins the first couple of weeks of June for properties. And our Heritage Advisory Committee is reviewing and updating the statements of cultural heritage value or interest. And then we're also holding an open house. And this slide is a lot, but it's really just what is next. So for any of our 2026 properties, our Heritage Advisory Committee has a goal of approving those statements at their September meeting of this year. Once the committee approves those statements, it then goes to a peer reviewer. And then after that, a staff report is provided to council recommending that they state their notice of intention to designate. And that's tentatively scheduled for the fall/winter of this year. And then come that point in time, there's a 120-day timeline for us to turn everything around, with the ultimate goal that those heritage designation bylaws would be passed sometime the spring of 2026. Awesome. That concludes the formal presentation.